I'm
Woo!
verified.
Yes. Yes. 8 a.m. We are doing this. 8:07. I really know what to. Ooh, look at that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kathy Boffman McLeod. I'm the director of the Adrienne Arsh Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. And at ARSHROC, which is what we call our organization for short, we are dedicated to protecting people and communities and building resilience for 1 billion people. And we deliver solutions to the impacts of climate change. And today, we are here to talk about one of our primary focal points of our work, which is extreme heat. And we know that cities are disproportionately affected by heat because of the urban heat island effect and because of population streaming into cities from failing farms and agricultural systems out in rural areas. And so we have this conflagration of humanity, of population, of heat being increased by the absorption of heat into dark surfaces of our asphalt and other surfaces that we use to build our cities, and that makes them even hotter. And that means health risk, that means social risk, inequalities, and infrastructure that is affected. And that means that everybody suffers. We suffer financially, economically, and especially at the human level, that our bodies can't take this heat. And so cities around the world, and particularly mayors, and today our mayors and partners, where we have partnered through the City Champions for Heat Action as a part of the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, are here to talk today about how cities are experiencing this extreme heat and what they are doing about it. And so let me start with Mayor Luis Donaldo Colosio from Monterrey, Mexico. Welcome to the panel, Mayor.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking, what is happening in Monterrey and how does heat affect your city?
Well, Monterrey is a city within, it's the heart of a metro area comprised of around 14 to 16 municipalities, depending on how you measure it. But the thing is, I mean, this is no novelty. No one can really, convince me otherwise because I've lived it. Over the last 30 years, we have an increase in temperatures for about 10 degrees. And this is an important fact because anyone that wants to say that climate change and extreme heat is not real, I can tell them otherwise. The thing about Monterrey and this whole metro area, it was a very poorly designed city that practically decimated all its green areas and public spaces. And we are desperately trying to recuperate these spaces and these reforestation efforts. Because the state of Nuevo León, which is where Monterrey is the capital, is a city-state, so to speak. Because around 92% of 92 to 95% of the entire state's population is concentrated in this metro area. I mean, out of the 51 municipalities that the state of Nuevo León has, pretty much everyone is concentrated into these 15 to 16 cities.
Wow.
So it's safe to say that with this enormous concentration of people in an urban area that is not properly fitted for this resilience to extreme heat, that it's actually causing quite the contrary, that it's procuring more extreme heat. And we're ill-prepared for this silent killer. And people are really suffering the consequences of this. I mean, we just came out, we're barely coming out of one of the worst droughts in our contemporary history. It was months without end that we didn't have freshwater supplies. And many people in their homes were completely deprived of clean water and sanitation. And that is, at least to say, an enormous problem for their livelihoods and for their health. But we have also seen a quite enormous spike, for example, in violence. And this is directly related to one of the biggest problems that we have, not only in Monterrey, but in all of Mexico, especially gender and domestic violence. And there is clear data that states how extreme heat impacts on our brain chemistry. Yeah. And we react in a very poor manner. And that's why we are working towards these actions to mitigate the impact that we have from extreme heat, not just adaptation, but mitigation, which is important. That duality in our strategy is key.
Great. And when it comes to those solutions on the adaptation to heat, what are some of the things that you're looking at in Monterrey?
Well, the most important thing that we are building is an urban park system and a green corridor system that provides not only a very aggressive reforestation program, but also sustainable mobility alternatives for people. Because the city of Monterrey was designed in a very automobile-centric model.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around the car. And people, we're not cars.
Yeah.
And we need other alternatives to move around. We need cycling lanes. We need walks. We need places to go and to do it in other ways that do not mandate for people to have to hop into a private car, because that is actually exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, that we know that nature-based solutions are.
It's a nature-based solution.
Cost-effective.
Yes.
So let me turn to Mauricio Rodas, who is a senior advisor for heat city diplomacy for Archrock, and the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador, and working with us and through City Champions for Heat Action has helped build and designed an advocacy strategy for heat through the leaders and the mayors around CCHA, which is City Champions for Heat Action. Can you tell us about the advocacy strategy and how what Mayor Colosio shared with us, how it fits together to go from advocacy to delivery on the ground for cooler, safer folks?
Thank you, Kathy. So in 2021, Archrock launched the City Champions for Heat Action, CCHA, initiative to work closely with mayors that are showing extraordinary leadership on climate action to support them to address effectively extreme heat-related risks. So we are working with a fantastic group of mayors, the mayor of Monterrey, the mayor of Athens, the city where Lenio comes from, the mayor of Freetown, Melbourne, Miami-Dade County, Santiago de Chile, Seville. And in all of these cities, we are delivering tailor-made solutions, tailor-made innovative solutions. But the interesting thing is that these mayors are not only implementing effective action locally to protect their people, their economies, jobs from extreme heat-related risks, but also they are upscaling that vision globally. And I think that's very important to highlight, because that's precisely what this session is about, cities taking the lead in heat action. So in that regard, the CCHA mayors decided to implement the Global Heat Advocacy Strategy, which aims at showcasing cities' particular needs, challenges, and opportunities to tackle extreme heat. It also aims at delivering an urgent global call to action and mobilizing international organizations, national governments, international financial institutions, the private sector, civil society, the academia, to embrace the urban extreme heat agenda as a priority and support cities to implement actionable solutions. As part of this strategy, and a key milestone of it, Archrock signed an MOU with UN Habitat during the World Urban Forum last June in Katowice, Poland, to mainstream extreme heat across the different fields of work of UN Habitat. And a very important component of that MOU is precisely the appointment of an Archrock UN Habitat's joint global chief heat officer, Lenio, who's going to be talking about that very important role in a minute. And so that the advocacy strategy is building upon that collaboration with UN Habitat and contemplates a number of key milestones for the next several months to keep building momentum on heat, considering that COP28 will be the cooling COP. So that's the idea. We have a timeline with concrete actions to deliver as part of this global heat advocacy strategy for the next several months. And this is a clear example of how, again, mayors are not only implementing effective action locally, but they are also raising awareness in the respective countries and regions and now taking this to the global scale. Mayors are taking the lead in heat action.
Beautiful. One of the best aspects of that is we know that it comes down to your city. It comes down to people, vulnerable communities in your city, and yet we need to accelerate this action so remarkably that we need big macro and high-level policy, but it has to land in cities. And so, and let me also say for the audience that Mayor Yvonne Aki-Sawyer is meant to be on the panel this morning and is detained, and so we're hoping she's going to be able to make it. So we know some folks came to see her, and we're hoping you get that chance. She's a strong partner of ours and a part of CCHA. So having said that, how it lands, let me move to Lenyo Mirvili, who started as the chief heat officer, so much more than that, Lenyo, started as the chief heat officer in Athens, and from that great work is now in a co-appointed position with UN Habitat, as Mauricio said. And so, Lenyo, when you look at that advocacy strategy and you think about how the work that is done on the ground in a community, you know, right down to a tree or to a pocket park, talk about that for a minute. How do you see that? And then going from Athens to the idea of the UN Habitat and all the cities that are a part of UN Habitat. Just share your perspectives on that advocacy strategy.
Thanks, Kathy. I think that the description of Mayor Colosio in relation to Monterrey is very apt for a lot of cities. To a larger or a smaller extent, our cities are, just to start from that, our cities, as we have said again and again, are the hotspots for climate, the impacts of climate change, and specifically for heat, which is something that we haven't been talking for, even though we've been talking about global warming for so long. So cities have, the way they're built are becoming more and more deadly for the people that live in them. They're kind of becoming more and more death traps as our climate is heating up and as the planet is heating up. So it makes a lot of sense to listen to cities because cities know where the problem is and what they really need to do to respond to it. And cities are not listened to. So a lot of the big policy that takes place that also decides where the budgets go and where the resilience and recovery kind of funding goes and where all of these kinds of decisions of where to give priorities are not, do not have cities as a partner in it.
Yeah.
And UN Habitat has a very strong role to play here. And it's really important, like in this COP, the UN Habitat is actually meeting with the ministers and having an interministerial kind of meeting. And so this, slowly, we see cities rising in international fora and their voice being more heard and kind of, so this move is an important move in this general movement because, again, heat is the poor relative in these discussions still. Like it has to rise up and become like the first kid on the block. It has to be at the table and be the urgency of it, be understood at the high level in the levels of policy so that people in cities can actually implement the policies that needed to be implemented and not the ideas that, you know, governments or higher institutions think that they should have. So Mauricio very aptly described this idea of how can mayors, what should mayors be talking about and how can they push the levers to move the agenda along. And I will try to support this from the UN Habitat and more generally as much as I can within the UN environment and the different agencies to make sure to elevate the understanding of the urgency to act on heat, to make heat kind of a special lever to kind of streamline and move policies along, and to help bring into the forefront, for example, the priorities of Secretary General Guterres, that one of them is the early warning systems. So for heat, early warning systems, as we at ArchRock know very well, really can save lives. So we know that a lot of the people that die from heat don't have to die from heat if we have the right system to warn them. I mean, we knew recently there was a report from the World Meteorological Organization that talked about Europe and how Europe, strangely enough, is heating up double, twice as fast as the average globe is heating up, Europe. And we had last year 15,000, some even say more, people die from heat this summer that just passed. And they are saying, even Germany, right? The most supposedly organized and prepared kind of type of state that even has the funding to do things. They knew they were going to have a heat wave, and still they lost thousands and thousands of people this summer from heat. So the early warning system is a big deal, and we can make sure that heat is part of the agenda for that and help with that. With categorization of heat waves, et cetera, but also the other side, which again is the other Guterres priority, as Mauricio has kind of said many times, has to do with adaptation and moving financial and really speeding up and streamlining finances for adaptation. So this is again something very important. We are part of the Cooling Coalition and working with different really strong partners to move along the agenda for, and with Kurt Schickman, move along the agenda for green infrastructure and other ways to kind of create resilient infrastructures and other plans, action plans for dealing with heat in many, many different cities, hopefully.
Great, thank you. So let me move back to Mayor Colosio. We met last year in Glasgow, and you declared a climate emergency for Monterrey, and that helps galvanize attention to the issues, water as one of the, and water scarcity as one of the primary issues. How does your Green New Deal, how does it work, and what role does it play in reducing the impacts of heat to vulnerable communities?
The Green Deal for Monterrey was a call to action. It is a call to action because it still holds to this day. It's a call to action in order to procure the involvement of all key actors of the city and all key stakeholders of the city into action. Let's say, not just the government is the sole responsible entity for mitigating climate change and extreme heat. I think every single citizen, well, we all of us have our own key part and role to play. From something as basic as changing our habits, but also to involve big industries to completely transform the way they regulate their practices, the way they build their infrastructure, the way that NGOs can participate with the government and with the people in order to make key aspects of our daily livelihood much more bearable.
And Monterrey is an industrial
it's a very industrial city, a very industrial center for work. And what we are implementing through the Green Deal for Monterrey is this coalition of the willing, so to speak. And everybody is getting in on it in the sense that every time more and more people are realizing that this whole concept, and I like how Lily said it, we've been talking about global warming for so many years now, and for some reason nobody links global warming with extreme heat.
It's ironic.
It's completely ironic. It's absurd. So what we're trying to do is not only raise this awareness of the subject, it's also to raise the cooperation in order to mitigate this impact, because people need to know, and we need to make them aware that this is a reality, that we're living in it, and the recent drought is more than enough proof so that we can really shift people awareness. Yeah. And what we're trying to do with this Green Deal is implement it as an umbrella strategy. And everything we do in sustainability is linked to this agenda. So what we're trying to do is reach out as much people, as much collaboration as possible. ArchRock is one of our key partners in this endeavor, in order to really make key strategic decisions and projects that have an immediate but long-lasting impact.
Super. That's a nice foreshadow for an 11 a.m. event that will be happening here. So hold that. Hold that. So in terms of thinking about infrastructure, and so oftentimes we talk about awareness of the fact that rail lines are melting and schools are closing and the metros are having to shut down, and so we see these things happening in spots around the world, but we don't yet have the data that we need to understand the impacts. And so we undertook an analysis to understand the economic impacts in one category, because we're really focused on human health, of worker productivity losses. And so that's harm to a worker and their health, and to the reduction of the impact, the reduction of their production of the product or the service they're offering, and also they're slowing down and ill from heat. And so we found that the impact to the US economy in 2020 was $100 billion in just one dimension alone. So it's not infrastructure, it's not healthcare, it's not business interruption. And so we still don't have our arms around how big an economic impact this is. And so just going back to the Green Deal as a great example of a call to action that can galvanize and attract capital, and will help, as your partner, continue to push economic information, so we know those investments we're making are paying off for long-term health of the economy and of the community. So let me turn to Mauricio, and when you think about the way that the requests that we are sending on behalf of the mayors, and we're asking global policy for leaders to meet and understand, and that awareness, back to awareness, how will that play out, and how can that accelerate action for our partners?
Well, I think that by focusing the global heat advocacy strategy in very concrete outcomes, that's the idea. And you just mentioned one, data. We need to foster the development of accurate data on heat. We are clearly underestimating the number of people killed by extreme heat, for example, among other extreme heat-related impacts that we don't know about yet. So that's a specific task for this global heat advocacy strategy. Another one is to keep raising awareness about this threat worldwide. I think ArchRock has been doing an amazing job by partnering with the global media for this to happen, but we need to be doing more. And that's another important outcome that the advocacy strategy is envisioning. And a very, very key one for me is that of finance. Because yes, it's key to raise awareness, it's key to engage global media, it's key to engage top world leaders into this endeavor, but we need financial resources to implement the kind of action cities and all levels of government need. And the problem is that, in particular, cities are confronting an international financial system that was designed for countries, not for cities.
Yeah, that's so
We need to make that system more cities-friendly.
Yes, please.
And that's a must. That's a must if we realize that, of course, it is in cities where the battle against climate change will be defined. And I can add to that it is in cities where extreme heat will or will not be tackled. And if countries want to meet their NDCs, if countries want to meet the Paris Agreement, they need cities. They need cities to play an effective role in tackling climate change. And for cities to do that, they need money to undertake the kind of action that is needed for this to happen. Now, we need to push for significant reform into the international financial system. But that will take time. So in the meantime, we need to come up with innovative financial solutions to channel direct financial facilities for cities to undertake not only extreme-related action, but in general climate action.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it is such great news what's going to happen today at 11 with the launch of the Cool Capital Stack. Stay tuned. You are invited to be the witness of this.
Just stay here. Just stay.
This great announcement today. This is a great launch. Because that's the
No
kind.
more spoilers, though.
I know.
That's the kind of solutions that cities and all levels of government need in order to undertake the kind of actions needed to protect people, the economy, infrastructure, and jobs from extreme heat-related risks.
Wonderful. Makes perfect sense. So when we think about the life-saving aspect, you've cited 15,000 deaths in Europe and in the US, in Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. In a 2-day period, there were 1,100 people dead. It's a mass casualty event.
2-day period.
2 days.
Wow.
Now, it takes time for that data to come. I mean, this is another piece of this. You don't know it immediately. It takes time. But I just want to talk about the life-saving aspect of this. And there's so much discussion in the climate space about deploying capital and accelerating and scaling. And there's a lot of, it's jargon. People are dying. It's a human. We're making the human case. We want to make the business case because we need to invest, but we also have to better understand with this data that our supply chains, our workforce, our infrastructure are all impacted by this. And we're just on the edge of really understanding the size and shape. But we're not on the edge of understanding the solutions. We do understand them. You know, a lot of that is about finance. So Lenyo, for you, I just want to talk about that, the human side of it. In Athens, you know, where are people's lives at risk? And I think it's important for people to know specifically, how do people get sick and people working outside? And so just talk about that for a minute, because I want to get back to, that's why we're doing this. We want to protect people's lives and livelihoods. And so share with us, would you please?
Yeah. So I'll try to bring the example of the big heat wave that hit Athens, not this summer, the summer before.
If only it had a name.
If only it had a name. So the heat wave of 2021 lasted for more than 3 weeks. It was the second heat wave that summer, and it reached temperatures that were record-breaking for Athens. It was close to 45 degrees Celsius in the city, in the center of the city. The media, however, and most of the attention went to the wildfires that also broke out at the same time all around the city and other parts of Greece. And it was correct to focus on the wildfires, because that year the wildfires actually burned 3 times as much than the average of 10 years of wildfires that we have every summer of surface.
And this is no coincidence.
Right, of course, they're directly related, right? It was one of the hottest and driest summers that we had been through. But what was devastating in some way, apart from the fact that all these ecosystems were devastated from the wildfires, was the fact that there wasn't enough attention paid to the heat wave. This city had these red and brown clouds over it that we have seen from photographs from California or Sydney, from the wildfire surrounding it. The air was absolutely unbearable to breathe because it was so hot, but also it had the microparticles from the fires. So it was also extremely toxic and deadly. The city had emptied out. So what is beautiful about Athens and cities like ours is that they are alive outdoors. And there are people in the streets and in the cafes and restaurants, and they're shopping, and they're like painting the walls with graffiti and doing like crazy things, and that's what makes a city alive, right? So the city was like a skeleton of itself because everybody had retreated indoors, nobody was going out. And of course, what was clearly, we know now, the hardest was for the people that, first of all, the main problem was the older people living alone.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
seniors living alone, we have a high level of energy poverty in Athens. So there's a lot of people that don't have money to turn on heating or cooling, or don't even own an air conditioning in Athens. And this reaches, depending on whether we're going through an economic crisis or not, almost 24-25% of the residents of Athens. We have actually reached this kind of level. 1 out of 4 people cannot afford the electricity bills. So, so we have senior people, pensioners with a very small income monthly. And we know now from the statistics that we get from the Red Cross that 83% of the deaths that we have from heat are people that die alone in their apartments, which is such a terrible death that can be avoided because, you know, if we create, like for example, we paired up with the IFRC through Arshrock and locally with the Hellenic Red Cross in Athens to create, to try to create buddy systems and volunteers that go and check on people. We just started this summer, but next summer it will be much more robust. We also have created hotlines that people can call and get help. The Red Cross has been an incredibly strategic partner in all of this because really in neighborhoods people can get organized and the neighborhood still works in Greece, but again, we're not focused on heat yet. People don't understand that heat exposure kills. So this is like still we have to raise awareness and start getting this kind of system of support mobilized. The other thing that we know is women with kids, especially trying to deal with shopping in the heat, to go and carry the food back home, to kind of, or take the kids from school, or all of this kind of, the whole kind of caretaking of kids and older people sometimes that women deal with is also very strenuous. Because especially kids also we know are a vulnerable population because they can't regulate their body heat easily. And of course the workers that work outdoors. I mean, I love this example that we say that in a category, it's kind of crazy to think that in a category 4 or category 5 hurricane, you would call to order a pizza. Because you can't even imagine somebody, you know, in a moped kind of coming in a category 5 to deliver the pizza to you. But you don't even think of that when we have a heat wave because we don't have categories, we don't have data and all that. So there's all these people that we don't think about that work in extreme heat. It doesn't have to be construction, even though construction is one of the worst kind of things, and agriculture as well. They're like, we have people working in horrendous conditions in the heat, often immigrants. Another Athens, I'm talking too much. So in Athens, we also have an immigrant population, and I'll finish with that. And often we have people, a lot of people living in small apartments together. So again, with energy poverty, like people that cannot afford to have air conditionings or turn them on, and people living in camps, in boxes, in these containers, which is also extremely terrible conditions for heat. So these are just touching on some of the populations that are really particularly
in places to prioritize when you start
exactly to prioritize.
Have your action plan.
Yes.
So we have time for just one question. If anybody has a question, Francis, do you have a question?
I'm still focused on the 11 o'clock.
Great. Good. Well, then why don't we? Yes, it is.
May I just say that I found it brilliant that you actually created a hotline for extreme heat. That's.
You know, it was Miami that actually I got the idea from. Miami had the first chief heat officer, and they created the hotline in Miami. So I thought, oh, we have to do that. And then we connected. This is so cool, right? We connected with the Red Cross.
Yes.
And then and then we didn't know what to say. Like, what is the script for the hotline? So we connected to the Australian Red Cross, who actually came to Athens, 2 people, and had a whole workshop on putting together the right kind of script. What questions do you ask? How do you know how to respond to that? Because they've had a hotline for 7 years now. So this, and then we kind of paired the municipality clinics, the municipal
Yes.
clinics, with the Red Cross, and did the whole kind of teaching, like an educational thing of how to deal with people on the phone, including like Australia. So I love this kind of
Yeah.
coordination and collaboration between cities and between organizations.
That's wonderful. Well, I have a question back here, sir.
Real quick, I'm fascinated by this disconnect that you mentioned between global warming and heat index. Got it. Okay. I'm fascinated by this disconnect that you mentioned between global warming and the heat index in cities, and also the story side of things. So, this summer I really thought that flashpoint of the melting runways in London. I thought
Right.
that really to me seemed like a wake-up call for world action, right?
Would seem like it.
melting, the closing subways, that sort of thing, the impact on commerce, but the runway thing seemed to particularly point it to me. Obviously, I know about the drought in the Southwest and the impacts on agriculture from that. The disconnect that I have there is what you mentioned about, cities, your population in Mexico, in Monterrey, not having access to clean water and sanitation, and the health impacts of that
We
are
also
staggering
had-
to me. So my question is there's, as you said, a need for, this connection to humanism and the storytelling. Where is that? Who's working on that? Who's doing the human side stories that might help advance this?
We're doing it.
We're doing it, yes.
Yeah, we're doing that.
It's part of, actually, this is part of this key strategic partnership that we're doing. Each of our cities has a chief heat officer that is not only a technical support for the city to implement these tailor-made solutions, like Mauricio said earlier, but also to create that advocacy, public advocacy, and raise that awareness in people. We also had this year one of the biggest wildfires in the metro area in space, sorry. And it's all correlated, and we cannot really lose that from our sides.
And but just
You know
very
what?
quickly,
So quickly.
we have talked about the social and equity aspects of heat, but we haven't talked today about the economic impact of it, which is huge. So that's the next
Yes.
conversation we should have.
No, it's
So,
just,
which we will-
just like Glenn said. I mean, every person in Athens retreated to their homes.
Yeah.
That is a similar effect economically to
Absolutely,
COVID,
absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
nothing is going
That's
forward.
right. And we have measured
Friends-
that. We've
Friends,
measured
I'm so
commerce.
sorry. We're
collapse.
butting into the next group's time, and I
Okay,
don't want to do
sorry.
that. And so they're at the door, and they're going to knock us down if we don't wrap it up. So I see Karen, and she's coming for me. Can we thank our panel and get on out of here? Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.